The transport ship landed on Velthera Prime with a loud roar. Steam rose from its engines as they cooled down. Deho stepped out and felt the alien air fill his lungs. It tasted different from Earth air, heavier, more dangerous. Ambassador Sojin walked beside him. She wore the formal blue uniform of the Earth Diplomatic Corps. Her face showed worry, but she tried to hide it. "Remember what we discussed?" she said quietly. "You represent all of humanity here. The eyes of the galaxy are watching." Deho nodded. He was only 20 years old. His black hair was cut short and neat. His body was thin compared to the massive aliens around him. He carried only a simple pack with basic supplies. No fancy weapons, no armor, just simple tools and his grandfather's old hunting knife. The spaceport buzzed with activity. Creatures from dozens of worlds had come to watch the great hunt. Some walked on two legs like humans. Others crawled on many legs or floated through the air. All of them stared at Deho with curiosity or amusement. A deep growl made Deho turn around. A Kelth warrior approached them. The alien stood 3 meters tall. His skin was covered in thick gray scales. Sharp claws extended from his fingers. Red eyes glowed in his reptilian face. This was Vextar, eldest son of the Kelth war clan. "So this is humanity's great hunter," Vextar said. His voice sounded like grinding stone. "I expected something more impressive." Other aliens gathered to watch. The Bruthen were there too. These were the largest hunters in the galaxy. They stood like walking mountains of muscle and bone. Their leader Gorth laughed when he saw Deho. The sound was like thunder. "The humans send us a child," Gorth boomed. "Does he even have claws? Fangs? Any weapons at all?" A group of Vorthak mind hunters floated nearby. Their purple skin glowed softly. Large black eyes stared at Deho without blinking. One of them spoke without moving its mouth. The words appeared directly in everyone's minds. This creature's thoughts are simple, primitive. He thinks of grass and trees and running water. How can such a weak mind survive the shadow stalkers? Laughter rippled through the crowd. Even some humans in the diplomatic group looked embarrassed. They whispered to each other about sending someone older, someone stronger, someone who would not make humanity look weak. Deho felt heat rise in his cheeks. He wanted to speak up, to defend himself. But his grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. "A good hunter listens more than he speaks. Learn your prey before you act." So Deho stayed quiet and listened. Ambassador Sojin stepped forward. Deho comes from a long line of hunters. On Earth, his people tracked prey across vast distances. They survived in places where others could not. They learned patience when others chose violence. Vextar snorted. "Patience will not help when the shadow stalkers come. These creatures have killed the finest warriors of 100 worlds. They are invisible death. They phase through solid matter like ghosts. They hunt in packs and show no mercy." "How many have you killed?" asked a Kelth female. Her name was Yulna, and she was known for her speed. "None," Deho answered honestly. "I have never seen a shadow stalker before today." The crowd erupted in fresh laughter. Some aliens made clicking sounds that meant amusement in their language. Others showed their teeth in predatory grins. "Never seen one?" Gorth roared. "Boy, most hunters spend years preparing for this moment. They study, they train, they upgrade their weapons and armor. What have you done?" Deho thought about his home village. He remembered running through mountain forests with his grandfather, learning to read animal tracks in mud and snow, sitting motionless for hours watching deer move through the trees, setting snares for rabbits, following wounded animals for days until they were too tired to run. "I learned to hunt," he said simply. This brought more laughter, but not from everyone. In the crowd, Deho noticed a young Kelth warrior watching him with interest instead of scorn. This was Kaelho, younger brother to Vextar. His scales were lighter colored and his eyes held more intelligence than cruelty. The tournament master stepped forward. He was a Zephyrian, tall and thin with blue skin and silver hair. His voice carried authority that made the crowd fall silent. "Welcome, hunters of the galaxy," he announced. Tomorrow at dawn you enter the forbidden zones of Velthara Prime. You will face the Shadow Stalkers in their own territory. Some of you will not return. Others will return changed forever. He gestured toward the dark mountains in the distance. The rules are simple. Survive 7 days. Hunt the Shadow Stalkers. Those who succeed will join the ranks of the galaxy's greatest predators. The crowd began to disperse. Hunters moved toward their assigned quarters to prepare. Deho started to follow Sojin when a voice stopped him. Human. He turned to see Kaelho approaching. The young Kelth moved with fluid grace. His claws were sheathed and his posture showed no threat. Your name is Deho, yes? Kaelho asked. Yes. I am Kaelho. I watched you during the speeches. You did not react to the insults with anger. You studied the crowd instead. Why? Deho considered his answer carefully. My grandfather taught me that an angry hunter makes mistakes. A calm hunter sees opportunities. Kaelho tilted his head. Interesting. Tell me, what opportunities do you see here? Deho looked around the spaceport. He saw the different hunter, groups clustering together by species. He saw how they moved, how they held their weapons, how they looked at each other. Most of these hunters think like predators, Deho said. They want to dominate, to prove they are strongest, but strength alone does not win every hunt. What does? Understanding your prey, knowing when to be patient, knowing when to strike, knowing when not to strike at all. Kaelho's eyes brightened with curiosity. You speak of hunting as if it were more than killing. It is more, Deho replied. Killing is just the end. The hunt is everything that comes before. For a moment, the two young hunters stood in silence. Around them, the sounds of preparation filled the air. Weapons being cleaned, armor being tested, final communications being sent to home worlds. My brother thinks you will die on the first day, Kaelho said finally. Your brother might be right, Deho admitted. But I did not come here to prove I am strongest, I came to learn. Kaelho showed his teeth in what might have been a smile. Perhaps there is more to humans than we believed. Good luck tomorrow, Deho of Earth. As the young Kelth walked away, Deho felt something shift inside him. He was still the smallest hunter here, still the weakest looking, still the most mocked. But for the first time since arriving, he did not feel completely alone. Tomorrow the real hunt would begin, and with it, everything would change. Dawn broke over Velthara Prime with a red sky that promised danger. The 43 hunters gathered at the edge of the Forbidden Zone. Steam rose from the toxic swamps ahead. Strange crystal formations jutted from the ground like broken teeth. Deho checked his simple pack one final time. Water purification tablets, basic medical supplies, some dried food. His grandfather's hunting knife. The other hunters carried plasma rifles, energy shields, and armor that could stop a missile. They looked at his simple gear with fresh amusement. The human brought camping supplies, Bextar sneered. Perhaps he plans to roast marshmallows with the Shadow Stalkers. Gorth, the Bruthan champion, laughed so hard the ground shook. His massive warhammer gleamed with energy crystals. When the Stalkers come for him, he can offer them trail mix. The tournament master raised his hand for silence. The hunt begins now. May the strongest survive. A horn sounded across the wasteland. The hunters scattered in different directions. Most ran at full speed, eager to find their prey quickly. Deho walked slowly into the swamp, studying the ground. Within the first hour, screams echoed across the zone. A Vorthak mind hunter had vanished while crossing a crystal ridge. Only his weapon remained, still glowing with psychic energy. The Shadow Stalkers had claimed their first victim. Deho found the creature's tracks in the mud nearby. They were strange, three-toed prints that seemed to fade in and out of existence, sometimes deep, sometimes barely there at all. He knelt and touched the mud around them. The soil was still warm. Whatever had made these tracks possessed body heat like a living creature, but the prints showed that it could become lighter or heavier at will. This meant the Shadow Stalkers could indeed phase between solid and ghost-like states. He followed the tracks carefully. They led to a grove of twisted trees where the air shimmered like heat waves. Deho stopped and watched. His grandfather had taught him that when something looked wrong, it usually was wrong. A movement in his peripheral vision made him turn. Kaelho approached through the trees, moving with practiced stealth. The young Kelth had been tracking the same signs. "You see them too," Kaelho whispered. The shimmer in the air, Deho nodded. "Something is there, but not quite there. My brother would charge forward with claws extended. He believes direct assault solves everything." "What do you believe?" Kaelho considered this. "I am beginning to think my brother is wrong about many things." A roar from deeper in the swamp interrupted them. Gorth's voice bellowed challenges at invisible enemies. The sound of his warhammer striking trees echoed through the zone. Then sudden silence. "The big ones always fall first," Deho said quietly. "Why?" "They make too much noise. Scare away some prey but attract others. Shadow stalkers seem to hunt the loudest targets first." Kaelho's eyes widened. "You think they are intelligent, not just beasts following instinct?" "Smart hunters always. Take the easiest prey first. Remove the dangerous ones while they are distracted." They found Gorth's body an hour later. The massive Bruthen lay face down in a pool of toxic water. His armor was intact, but he was dead. No wounds were visible on his body. "How did they kill him?" Kaelho asked. Deho examined the corpse carefully. "His eyes show burst blood vessels. His mouth has foam. I think they stopped his breathing somehow. Phased into his lungs and became solid again." Kaelho realized with horror. The day continued with more deaths. A pack of Zephyrian speed hunters vanished while chasing shadows through crystal caves. Their weapons were found arranged in a perfect circle, as if placed there deliberately. "That is not random," Deho observed. "They are sending us a message." "What message?" "Stop hunting us." As evening approached, only 30 hunters remained alive. Most had found hiding places to wait out the night. Some still searched aggressively for their prey. A few had started working together despite the competition rules. Deho made his camp in a small clearing. He built no fire that would give away his position. Instead, he dug a shallow depression and lined it with stones. Then he set small sticks and leaves in patterns around the area. Kaelho watched with curiosity. "What are you doing?" "Setting an alarm system. If anything approaches while we sleep, it will disturb these patterns. Primitive, but effective. Sometimes simple methods work better than complex ones." During the night, Deho heard movement in the forest. Not the heavy footsteps of other hunters, but something lighter. More careful. He touched Kaelho's shoulder and both young hunters lay perfectly still. 3 shadow stalkers moved through their camp. They were visible in moonlight as translucent figures about human height. Their movements were graceful and deliberate. They studied the 2 sleeping hunters for several minutes. Then they did something unexpected. Instead of attacking, they began to communicate with each other using soft clicking sounds. The clicks had rhythm and pattern like a language. One of the creatures approached Deho closely. It seemed to smell him or taste his scent somehow. Then it made a different sound, almost like a question. Deho stayed motionless but opened his eyes slightly. The shadow stalker was looking directly at him. Its eyes held intelligence and something else. Sadness, maybe, or fear. The creatures left without harming either hunter. As their footsteps faded into the distance, Kaelho whispered urgently. "Why? Did they not kill us?" "I do not know, but I think we learned something important tonight." "What?" "They chose not to kill us. That means they can think. They can make decisions. They are not just mindless predators." The second day brought fresh horrors. More hunters died in strange ways. Some were found with their weapons missing. Others disappeared entirely, leaving only their boots behind. But Deho noticed patterns. In the attacks, the shadow stalkers always took aggressive hunters first. Those who showed respect for the environment lasted longer. Those who damaged trees or poisoned water sources died quickly. "They are protecting their territory," he told Kaelho, "like any intelligent species would. If that is true, then this tournament is not a hunt. It is an invasion." On the third day, While tracking near a crystal cave system, they encountered a group of panicked Vorthak survivors. The purple-skinned psychics were normally calm and controlled. Now they gibbered with fear. The thoughts. One of them moaned. We tried to read their minds and found something terrible. They are not animals. They are people. They have families. Children. We have been killing people. Before Daeho could respond, shadows moved in the cave mouth. 6 shadow stalkers emerged, surrounding the group. But instead of attacking immediately, they began their clicking communication again. Daeho stepped forward slowly. He set down his knife and raised his empty hands. Then he attempted something that seemed impossible. He tried to copy their clicking sounds. His first attempts were clumsy. The creatures tilted their heads like confused animals. But Daeho persisted, trying different tones and rhythms. Finally, one of the shadow stalkers responded with a different pattern. It sounded almost like laughter. "What are you doing?" Kaelho whispered. "Learning," Daeho replied. "My grandfather always said the best way to understand your prey is to talk to it." The largest shadow stalker approached him. It made a series of slow, careful clicks. Daeho listened intently and tried to repeat the pattern. Suddenly, all the creatures went rigid. They stared past the hunters toward the cave entrance. A new sound echoed from the depths below. Heavy footsteps. Ancient and powerful. Something much older than the shadow stalkers was coming up from the deep places of Velthera Prime, and it had been listening to everything. The footsteps grew louder. Each step echoed through the crystal caverns like distant thunder. The shadow stalkers backed away from the cave entrance, clicking rapidly in what sounded like alarm. Even these deadly hunters feared whatever was coming. A figure emerged from the darkness. It was massive, even for a Kelth warrior. Ancient scars covered gray scales that had dulled with age. One eye was missing, replaced by a deep hollow that spoke of old battles. The creature wore simple leather clothing instead of modern armor. Bone weapons hung from his belt. Kaelho gasped. Thakvar the Exile. Daeho had heard stories of this legend. 3 centuries ago, Thakvar had been the greatest hunter in the galaxy. He had tracked prey across 1,000 worlds. Then suddenly, he vanished. Some said he had gone mad. Others claimed he had discovered something so terrible that it broke his mind. The ancient warrior looked at the group of hunters with his one good eye. The Vorthak psychics tried to read his thoughts but recoiled in pain. Whatever lived in that old mind was too vast and dark for them to touch. "Still playing games with children," Thakvar said. His voice was like grinding stone mixed with winter wind. "Still calling murder a sport." Vextar had arrived with several other surviving hunters. The younger Kelth warrior showed his claws and snarled at the ancient. "You are dead to our people, old one. You have no right to speak here." Thakvar ignored him completely. Instead, he walked directly to Daeho. The human stood his ground despite every instinct screaming at him to run. The ancient predator circled him slowly, studying him like a puzzle. "You tried to speak with them," Thakvar said. It was not a question. "Yes." "Why?" Daeho thought carefully before answering. "My grandfather taught me that everything in nature has a voice. Even prey animals try to communicate before they fight. It seemed wrong not to listen." The old warrior stopped circling. He stared at Daeho with surprise that quickly turned to something like recognition. "Your grandfather was wise. What else did he teach you?" "That the best hunters know when not to hunt." A sound escaped Thakvar that might have been laughter. "Yes? Yes, I see it now." He turned to address the group. "This human understands what the rest of you cannot. You are not hunters here. You are invaders." The shadow stalkers had been watching this exchange. Now the largest one approached Thakvar directly. It made a complex series of clicks and whistles. The ancient warrior responded in the same language. Kaelho stared in shock. "You can speak with them?" "I have had 3 centuries to learn," Thakvar replied. "Her name is Sil-Ara. She is asking if the young human truly wishes to understand." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that this one might be different, that his people hunt with their minds instead of their claws." Sil'ara approached Deho cautiously. She extended one translucent hand toward him. When he did not pull away, she touched his forehead gently. The contact sent images flooding into his mind. He saw the shadow stalkers as they truly were. Not monsters, but a peaceful people living in the deep places of their world. They had families, children, art and music and poetry. They had lived in harmony with their planet for thousands of years. Then the hunters came. At first just a few seeking rare prey for sport. The shadow stalkers tried to hide. When that failed, they tried to communicate. The hunters saw only animals and continued killing. Generation after generation, the tournament grew larger. More species came to prove their worth against the legendary shadow stalkers. Each year, fewer of Sil'ara's people survived. The images shifted. Deho saw shadow stalker children hiding in the deep caves, while their parents died defending them. He saw ancient cities abandoned as the people retreated deeper underground. He saw a proud civilization slowly dying. When the vision ended, tears ran down his face. Sil'ara stepped back, clicking softly to Thakvar. "She says you understand their pain," the ancient warrior translated. "She has never shown those memories to an outsider before." "How long have you known?" Deho asked. "I began to suspect during my first hunt here, 200 years ago. I saw intelligence in their tactics, purpose in their actions. It took me decades to learn their language and discover the truth. Why did you not tell anyone?" Thakvar's scarred face twisted with old rage. "I tried. The tournament organizers called me mad. They said the stress of hunting had broken my mind. When I persisted, they declared me mentally unfit and exiled me from Kelth society." Vextar snarled. "Because you were mad. You chose animals over your own people." "I chose truth over comfortable lies," Thakvar replied. "Just as this human chooses understanding over violence." The ancient warrior turned back to Deho. "Will you come with me? Will you see their world as it truly is?" "Where?" "The deep places. The phase-shifted reality where they truly live. No hunter has ever seen it and returned unchanged." Deho looked at the shadow stalkers surrounding them. He thought of the images Sil'ara had shared, the pain and fear and desperate hope in those memories. "I will come." Kaelho stepped forward. "I will come too." Vextar roared in fury. "You betray your own species for animals." "No," Kaelho replied calmly. "I choose to learn the truth instead of living a lie." The Vorthak psychics backed away from the group. "This is madness. The tournament must continue. We cannot simply stop because of one human's delusions." "Then continue," Thakvar said. "Hunt each other if you must have blood. But leave the true people of this world in peace." He began walking toward a crystal formation that glowed with inner light. Sil'ara and the other shadow stalkers moved ahead of him, their forms becoming more translucent as they approached the crystal. "This is the threshold," Thakvar explained. "Beyond lies their true realm. Are you ready to see reality as it truly exists?" Deho nodded. Kaelho moved to stand beside him. Together, the two young hunters followed the ancient warrior and the shadow stalkers toward the glowing crystal. Behind them, Vextar screamed challenges and threats, but his voice grew distant as they approached the threshold. The last thing Deho heard was the sound of other hunters arguing about what to do next. Then the crystal light surrounded them, and everything changed. The world dissolved into pure energy and reformed as something entirely different. They stood now in a place that existed between dimensions. Here, the shadow stalkers appeared as they truly were. Beautiful beings of light and thought and ancient wisdom. And here, in this place of truth, the real hunt would finally begin. The phase-shifted realm was beautiful beyond words. Cities of living crystal grew from the ground like frozen music. Gardens of light flowers bloomed in impossible colors. Rivers of pure energy flowed between structures that seemed to breathe with their own life. Deho stared in wonder. This was not the primitive hiding place he had expected. This was an advanced civilization that had learned to live in harmony with the very fabric of reality itself. How long have they existed like this? He asked Thakvar. 50,000 years, the ancient warrior replied. They evolved beyond physical form while your species was still learning to make fire. They chose to exist partially in this dimension to avoid conflicts with younger species. Shadow stalkers moved through their city like graceful spirits. Some tended gardens of crystalline trees. Others created art from shaped light and sound. Children played games that involved shifting between dimensions. But Deho also saw signs of fear. Guards stood watch at every entrance. Families huddled together in defensive groups. Ancient faces showed the weariness of a people under siege. Silara led them to the city center. Here stood a great hall made from a single enormous crystal. Inside, hundreds of shadow stalkers had gathered. They clicked and whistled in urgent conversation. They are debating whether to trust you, Thakvar explained. Many have lost family to the hunters. They see all solid form beings as enemies. An elderly shadow stalker approached them. His form was more faded than the others, as if age had made him less able to maintain physical shape. When he spoke, his clicks carried deep authority. This is Elder Toknam, Thakvar said. He asks why we have brought more hunters to their sacred place. Deho stepped forward slowly. He tried to remember the clicking patterns he had heard before. His attempts were clumsy, but the meaning was clear. He was trying to say, friend, and peace. The elder's expression changed. He made a rapid series of sounds to the assembly. Other shadow stalkers began to gather around, studying the young human with new interest. He says no solid form being has ever tried to learn our language before, Silara explained through Thakvar. Not in 50,000 years of contact with other species. Kaelho watched the exchange with growing amazement. They are so advanced. Why do they not fight back against the hunters? They could destroy the tournament easily. Thakvar translated the question. The answer that came back made both young hunters feel ashamed. They tried fighting back once, Thakvar said quietly. 700 years ago, when the first hunters came to their world, they defended themselves and killed many invaders. What happened? The galaxy declared them a hostile species. Warships came to sterilize their planet. They had to choose between extinction and hiding. They chose to hide and let themselves be called mindless beasts. Deho felt sick. An entire civilization had been forced to pretend they were animals, just to survive. They had watched their people die in sporting events rather than risk total genocide. How many are left? He asked. The numbers that came back were heartbreaking. Millions of shadow stalkers once lived on Velthera Prime. Now fewer than 10,000 remained. Each tournament reduced their numbers further. Suddenly alarms began to sound throughout the Crystal City. Not mechanical alarms, but harmonic vibrations that made the very air shiver. Guards rushed to defensive positions. What is happening? Kaelho asked. Silara's response was filled with fear. The other hunters have found the threshold. They are trying to force their way into our realm. Through the crystal walls they could see the normal dimension. Vextar led a group of surviving hunters toward the glowing crystal formation. They carried heavy weapons and energy-cutting tools. They mean to break through, Thakvar growled. Fools! They do not understand that damaging the threshold could destroy both dimensions. Elder Toknam spoke urgently to the assembly. Shadow stalkers began to fade from view as they prepared to defend their home. But Deho could see the resignation in their movements. They had been fighting a losing battle for centuries. There has to be another way, he said. What way? Thakvar asked. Your people are too proud to admit they have been committing genocide. My people are too stubborn to show mercy to those who show them none. Deho thought of his grandfather's teachings. Sometimes the hardest hunt was knowing when to stop hunting. Sometimes the greatest victory came from choosing not to fight. What if we could make them understand, he said. Not just tell them, but show them like Silara showed me. The other hunters would never allow a mind link. They would see it as weakness. Then we make it part of the tournament. A challenge they cannot refuse. Kaelho's eyes brightened. A duel of honor. My brother values that above all else. Thakvar considered this. It could work, But the risk is enormous. If you lose, nothing changes. The tournaments continue. The Shadow Stalkers keep dying. And if I win, if you win, you could demand an end to the hunting, force the galaxy to recognize the Shadow Stalkers as people instead of prey. Deho looked around the Crystal City. He saw children playing in gardens of light, families holding each other close, artists creating beauty from pure thought. All of it would be lost if nothing changed. "I will do it," he said. Silara approached him directly. She placed her translucent hands on his shoulders and spoke in rapid clicks. Her tone was urgent and grateful. "She says you would risk your life for people you just met," Takvar translated. "She wants to know why." Deho thought about his answer carefully. "On Earth, we have a saying. We are all connected. What hurts one hurts all. What saves one saves all." The Shadowstalker matriarch made a sound that needed no translation. It was the sound of hope being born in a heart that had almost forgotten how to feel it. Elder Toknam spoke to the assembly. His words caused excited clicking throughout the hall. Many Shadowstalkers turned to look at Deho with something like reverence. "He has declared you an honorary member of their people," Thakvar explained. "It is an honor never given to a solid-form being before. You are now Deho of two worlds." Outside, the sound of energy weapons grew louder. Vextar and his hunters were cutting through the threshold barrier. Soon they would break into the Crystal City and the slaughter would begin. "We need to go back," Deho said. "If I am going to challenge your brother, it must be in their world where others can witness it." Kaelho nodded grimly. "Vextar will not refuse a formal duel. His pride would not allow it. But he is stronger than you," Takvar warned. "Faster, better armed. In a fair fight he will kill you easily." Deho smiled sadly. "Then I will have to make sure it is not a fair fight. My grandfather always said the best way to beat a stronger opponent is to make them beat themselves." As they prepared to return to the normal dimension, Silara gave Deho a small crystal pendant. When he touched it, he could hear the thoughts and hopes of every shadow stalker in the city. Their faith in him was both humbling and terrifying. The fate of two civilizations now rested on the shoulders of a young human who had come to learn and stayed to save everyone he could. The return to normal space felt like diving into cold water. The Crystal City vanished, replaced by the harsh reality of Velthara Prime's caves. Vextar and his hunters had successfully cut through the threshold barrier. Energy weapons hummed as they prepared for battle. "Where have you been?" Vextar demanded. His red eyes blazed with fury. "What lies has the mad exile filled your head with?" Behind him stood the surviving hunters. Less than 20 remained from the original 43. Most looked desperate and afraid. The Shadow Stalkers had been picking them off one by one during the night. Deho stepped forward with Thakvar and Kaelho beside him. Silara and several other Shadow Stalkers materialized around them, their forms shimmering between solid and transparent. "They are not animals," Deho said simply. "They are people. They have families, cities, art, and culture older than most civilizations in the galaxy." The hunters laughed. Some made mocking sounds. A few raised their weapons threateningly. "Impossible," said Commander Yulna, the Kelth female warrior. "Animals cannot build cities, they cannot create art." "Then see for yourself." Deho held up the crystal pendant Silara had given him. It began to glow with soft light. Images projected into the air around them. The hunters saw the Crystal City in all its beauty. They saw Shadow Stalker families living in harmony. They saw children playing and artists creating and elders teaching wisdom to the young. The silence that followed was deafening. Some hunters lowered their weapons in shock. Others stared with growing horror as they realized what they had been doing. "Lies," Vextar snarled. "Tricks and illusions meant to weaken our resolve." But his voice lacked conviction. Even he could see the truth in those images. Commander Yulna spoke first. "If this is real, then we have been murdering innocent people for sport." "It is not real," Vextar insisted. "The exile has gone mad and infected others with his delusions. We came here to hunt beasts, not to be deceived by pretty pictures." Kaelho stepped forward to face his older brother. I have seen their world with my own eyes. I have spoken with their leaders. They are as intelligent as we are. More so in many ways. You betray your own blood for aliens, Vextar roared. I choose truth over comfortable lies. The tension grew thick enough to cut. Some hunters began to back away, wanting no part in what was clearly becoming a family dispute. Others moved closer, eager to see violence. That was when the tournament organizers arrived. A group of officials in expensive suits emerged from a transport ship. At their head walked Director Golthek, a wealthy Zephyrian who owned the tournament franchise. His silver eyes showed cold calculation as he surveyed the scene. What is the meaning of this disruption? He demanded. The tournament schedule is being delayed. Our sponsors are becoming impatient. Ambassador So-Jin had arrived with the officials. She looked pale and worried as she took in the situation. Daeho, what have you discovered? The Shadow Stalkers are not animals, he replied. This is not a hunt. It is genocide. Director Golthek's expression did not change. Ridiculous. These creatures have been classified as non-sentient for over 2 centuries. The classification has been verified by multiple scientific surveys. Surveys that were paid for by tournament sponsors, Takvar growled. I have read the real reports, the ones that were suppressed. You have no proof of such accusations. Silara stepped forward. She began to speak in perfect galactic standard, the common language used by all spacefaring civilizations. Her voice was clear and melodious, carrying the dignity of ancient wisdom. We are the people of Velthara Prime, she said. We have lived in peace for 50,000 years. We tried to communicate with the first hunters who came to our world. They killed our diplomats and called us beasts. We have hidden in shame ever since, watching our children die for the entertainment of strangers. The hunters stared in shock. Many had never heard an animal speak before, much less with such eloquence and intelligence. Director Golthek's face went pale. Impossible. The vocal cords necessary for speech, the brain structures required for language, none of it exists in these creatures. Because you never bothered to look properly, Takvar replied. You saw what you wanted to see, what was profitable to see. Elder Toknam materialized beside Sil-Ara. He began to recite poetry in the ancient Shadow Stalker language, then translated it into galactic standard. The words spoke of loss and grief and hope that someday the killing would end. More Shadow Stalkers appeared. They formed a circle around the hunters and began to sing. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, clearly the product of sophisticated musical tradition. This proves nothing, Vextar said, but his voice was shaking now. Trained animals can be taught to mimic speech and song. Director Golthek stepped forward urgently. Regardless of these claims, the tournament must continue. We have contracts with major entertainment networks, billions of credits in advertising revenue. We cannot simply cancel because of unsubstantiated allegations. What about the truth? Daeho asked. Truth is irrelevant. Business is business. Ambassador So-Jin looked sick. If this becomes public knowledge, the diplomatic consequences will be enormous. Every species in the galaxy will question humanity's moral authority. Then, we make sure it does not become public, the director said coldly. These witnesses can be dealt with quietly. The tournament continues as scheduled. Several armed security guards moved to surround the group. Their weapons were set to lethal settings. You would murder us to protect your profits? Kaelho asked. In disbelief. We would eliminate a problem before it becomes larger, Director Golthek replied. Nothing personal. That was when Vextar surprised everyone. The proud Kelth warrior stepped between his brother and the guards. His claws extended, and his scales flared with defensive posturing. No, he said simply. Stand aside, the director ordered. This does not concern you. It concerns me deeply. These are my brother and my huntmate. I may disagree with them, but I will not allow them to be murdered by cowards with business degrees. The standoff stretched taut. Guards raised their weapons. Hunters chose sides. The Shadow Stalkers prepared to defend their new allies. Then Daeho stepped forward. There is another way. What way? Director Golthek demanded. A formal challenge. Single combat between champions. Winner takes all. The director's eyes gleamed with sudden interest. You would fight for the right to end the tournament? I would fight for the truth. And if you lose? Then the tournaments continue. The Shadowstalkers remain classified as animals. Everyone here swears an oath of silence. And if you win, the Shadowstalkers are granted full recognition as a sentient species. The tournaments end forever. Reparations are paid for centuries of murder. Director Golthek smiled coldly. Acceptable. Choose your opponent. Deho looked directly at Vextar. I challenge the greatest hunter here, the one who best represents the old ways of thinking. Vextar's eyes widened in surprise. Then slowly, inevitably, they filled with grim acceptance. I accept your challenge, human. May the strongest philosophy prevail. As the two warriors faced each other in the crystal cavern, the fate of two species hung in the balance. But this would be more than a fight between individuals. It would be a battle between two completely different ways of seeing the universe. The crystal amphitheater had witnessed many battles over the centuries, but none like this. Word had spread quickly through subspace communications. Representatives from dozens of worlds arrived to watch the duel that would determine the fate of an entire species. Deho stood in the center of the arena wearing simple clothing. He carried only his grandfather's hunting knife and a few basic supplies. Across from him, Vextar looked like a living weapon. His scales gleamed with protective oils. Energy claws extended from his gauntlets. Armor covered his massive frame. This is not a fair fight, Kaelho whispered to Thakvar. My brother is 3 times his size and has natural weapons. Fair fights are rare in nature, the ancient warrior replied. Your human friend understands this. He has a plan. In the viewing stands, Director Golthek spoke excitedly with network executives. Cameras floated around the arena, broadcasting the event across the galaxy. Billions of beings watched as the small human faced the mighty Kelth champion. Ambassador Sojin sat with other diplomatic officials. Her face showed deep worry. If Deho lost, humanity's reputation would be forever damaged. They would be seen as the species that tried to ruin the galaxy's greatest sporting event with false accusations. The Shadowstalkers watched from the edges of the arena. They had made themselves visible as a show of support for their champion. Silara held the crystal pendant that connected her to Deho's thoughts. Through it, she could feel his calm determination. Tournament Master Velkon raised his hand for silence. The challenge is simple. Single combat until one fighter yields or falls. The winner's people get to decide the fate of the Shadowstalkers. He lowered his hand. Begin. Vextar charged immediately. His massive form moved with surprising speed across the crystal floor. Energy claws sparked as he slashed at Deho's head. The human rolled aside at the last second. Vextar's claws struck the crystal ground, sending up showers of sparks. He turned and charged again, roaring with battle fury. Again, Deho avoided the attack. He was faster than he looked, using his smaller size to stay out of reach. But everyone could see he was already breathing hard from the effort of dodging. Run all you want, Vextar snarled. You cannot avoid me forever. The Kelth warrior began using more sophisticated tactics. He feinted left, then struck right. He used his longer reach to corner Deho against the arena walls. Each attack came closer to connecting. The crowd began to murmur. This looked like it would be over quickly. The human was clearly outmatched. But Deho was not just dodging randomly. He was studying his opponent's patterns. Every warrior had habits, preferred angles of attack, favorite combinations. His grandfather had taught him to watch for these things. After 10 minutes of constant movement, Deho began to change his strategy. Instead of just avoiding attacks, he started leading them. When Vextar charged, Deho would move just enough to make the warrior miss by inches. When claws slashed toward him, he would duck and roll, making his opponent overextend. What is he doing? Someone in the crowd asked. Thakvar smiled grimly. He is making the big warrior work harder than necessary. Vextar is strong, but he is not used to long fights. His people prefer quick, decisive battles. Indeed, the Kelth champion was beginning to show signs of fatigue. His charges were slightly slower. His breathing was becoming labored. Sweat dripped from his scales despite the cool air. Deho had barely broken a sweat. Human endurance was legendary among those who bothered to study Earth biology. Humans could run for hours when other species tired in minutes. Stand still and fight like a warrior, Vextar panted. I am fighting like a human, Deho replied calmly. The crowd was becoming restless. Some called for more action. Others began to appreciate the subtle strategy at work. This was not just about strength versus speed. It was about different philosophies of combat. 20 minutes into the fight, Vextar made his first serious mistake. Exhausted and frustrated, he put all his strength into one massive overhead strike. His energy claws came down like falling meteors. Deho sidestepped smoothly. Vextar's claws struck the crystal floor with tremendous force, embedding themselves deep in the stone. For a moment, the warrior was trapped as he tried to pull his weapons free. In that moment, Deho struck. Not with his knife, but with his hands. He grabbed Vextar's helmet and yanked it aside, exposing the warrior's neck. His grandfather's knife appeared at the Kelth's throat. The arena fell silent. One quick cut, and the fight would be over. Yield, Deho said quietly. Vextar stared at him in shock. Why do you not finish it? You have won. Because killing you would not prove anything. It would just make me another predator. I do not understand. Deho stepped back and lowered his weapon. My grandfather taught me that the strongest hunters know when not to hunt. You are not my enemy, Vextar. You are someone who has been lied to for so long that you cannot see the truth. He offered his hand to help the exhausted warrior stand. The real enemy is the system that profits from death, the people who turn murder into entertainment. Vextar stared at the offered hand for a long moment. His worldview was crumbling around him. Everything he had believed about strength and honor was being challenged by this small human's mercy. Slowly, he reached out and grasped Deho's hand. The human pulled him to his feet with surprising strength. I yield, Vextar said, his voice carrying across the silent arena. Not to superior force, but to superior wisdom. The crowd erupted. Some cheered the unexpected ending. Others booed, wanting to see blood. The network executives looked furious at being denied their violent climax. Director Golthek stood up in his luxury box. This is unacceptable. The fight was not concluded properly. It was concluded perfectly, Ambassador Sojin replied, also standing. The terms were clear. Combat until one fighter yields. Vextar has yielded. The human cheated somehow. The human won through intelligence and endurance, traits that apparently some people no longer value. In the arena, Silara and the other shadow stalkers surrounded Deho. They clicked and sang in celebration. Their people were finally free. But Vextar had one more surprise. He turned to address the crowd and the cameras broadcasting across the galaxy. I have been a fool, he announced. I called myself a great hunter, but I never bothered to truly understand my prey. This human has shown me that real strength comes from protecting others, not destroying them. He gestured toward the shadow stalkers. These people have suffered for centuries while I and others like me called ourselves heroes. We were not heroes. We were murderers hiding behind tradition and sport. The crowd was stunned into silence. A legendary warrior publicly admitting he was wrong was unprecedented. Thakvar approached the group in the arena. Well done, young brother, he said to Deho. You have accomplished what I could not in 3 centuries of exile. What happens now? Deho asked. Now the real work begins. The shadow stalkers must be integrated into galactic society. Reparations must be paid. The entertainment industry must find new forms of competition that do not involve murder. Director E. Golthek was already being escorted away by security forces. The evidence of his cover-up was too overwhelming to ignore. Other tournament organizers faced similar arrests. Ambassador Sojin approached Daeho with tears in her eyes. You did it. You saved an entire species and changed how the galaxy thinks about hunting. We all did it, Daeho corrected. Kaelho chose truth over loyalty to his brother's old beliefs. Takvar spent centuries preparing for this moment. The Shadow Stalkers had the courage to reveal themselves despite centuries of fear. Vextar stood nearby, still processing his defeat. What will you do with your victory? He asked. Help rebuild what was broken, Daeho replied. Make sure this never happens again. The former champion nodded slowly. Then I will help you. It is the least I can do to atone for my blindness. Kaelho embraced his older brother. Now we are both learning what it truly means to be warriors. As the arena emptied, and the reporters filed their stories, a new chapter in galactic history began. The Shadow Stalkers emerged from hiding to share their ancient wisdom with younger species. The hunting tournaments became cultural exchange programs, and throughout the galaxy, people began to question other traditions that might hide uncomfortable truths. Daeho returned to Earth not as a conquering hero but as a bridge builder. He established the Velthera Institute, where beings from different worlds could learn to understand each other instead of fearing their differences. In his office, he kept 2 items on his desk. His grandfather's hunting knife, reminder of the wisdom passed down through generations, and the crystal pendant from Silura, connecting him always to the people he had helped save. The greatest hunt had ended not with death, but with the birth of understanding between all thinking beings. And in that understanding, the galaxy found a new way to define strength.